Hello YouTube and welcome to Full Dottle, a channel dedicated to tamping topics such as pipes, tobacco, lore, and more. I am your host, the Bearded Briarman, and without further ado, let's get lit. Welcome back everyone, and on this episode of Full Dottle, I'm going to be reviewing the changes that may have occurred in my home stoving experiment. Now I've already tasted the fresh tobacco. I've got a bright and a red Virginia. I've already tasted the fresh tobaccos, and now I'm going to open up these jars. They've been sitting for 2 weeks. And I'm going to review them, and hopefully we have a good change. So I've got 2 cameras set up. I don't know if I'm going to use both of the film footage that I've got, but I've got my GoPro set up over here looking directly at my tobacco tray, and then I've got you guys in front of me here. So we'll see what happens with this, but I'm very excited to find out. Let's see what happens. So I've got the red Virginia here set up. You can tell, I don't know if you can see it on the camera really clearly here, but there is a vacuum seal on the jar. It is concaved there. So let's open it up and see what has happened. Oh my goodness. There we go. Let me smell it here. Let me compare it to the fresh. This is the fresh jar. I don't see a noticeable difference in the colors at all. This is the home stove. This is the fresh. Okay, so there's definitely a difference in the aroma. The bouquet of the fresh is really grassy, woody, and nutty. But the bouquet of the home stoved has a very rich, caramelized, brown sugar and freshly baked pastry smell. So let's load up this pipe. As with all of my first impression reviews, I am going to be enjoying it out of my meerschaum. This is a tomato lattice finish. So let me load this up. I'll be right back with you. We'll light it up and we'll see what the differences are. So I've got my pipe loaded up here. And the first thing that I noticed after taking this out, you can see, I'm hoping you can catch this on the GoPro, you can see that the color is just a little bit darker. There's not much of a change, but it is just a little bit darker. It is a little bit on the dry side. I would say that this is too dry. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to rehydrate it later. I'm not going to do it now. I'm going to go ahead and taste it now. It shouldn't affect the flavor as much. It might smoke a little bit on the harsh side. I don't think it's going to be that bad because it's about what you would expect in haunted bookshop. But I would say if I were doing this at home, I would probably, instead of doing a dry stove, shout out to Garbage Man Piper here for his wonderful tool. If I were doing this home stoving at home, if I were you guys, what I would do is I would go ahead and rehydrate the tobacco after you're done. I spoke to Jeremy Reeves over at Cornell and Dill about this process, and he told me that what I have done is basically what they do. There's not a lot of difference here. It's just on an industrial scale. However, there are more than one type of procedure that you can do here. I'm going to turn off the GoPro. There is more than one procedure that you can do. This is considered a dry stoving. It's a little different from toasting. Toasting would be open when you're increasing the temperature of it. This was placed in a jar and it was sealed. This is a dry stoving. I'm going to do another episode that I believe I'm going to do another episode on a more moist stoving, where I'm actually going to hydrate the tobacco, saturate it with distilled water, do it again, and we'll see what happens there. I'd also like to do an episode on tin stoving, where I take a tin, I think I'm going to use a Cabby's mixture, which has a very green type bright Virginia in it, and stove it in the tin before I break the seal, just like Fred Hanna had suggested, and see what that does to it. So stay tuned, and maybe if there's enough interest in it, I'll go ahead and do those episodes. But for now, let's light this up and see what changes may have occurred. So. The flavor of the red Virginia did get deeper. I can tell that there's a lot more earthy and woody flavors coming from this. And the sweetness has picked up just a little bit. It's very similar. Honestly, I'm going to say that I don't notice enough change that I would say that this is a worthwhile pursuit, as far as just doing a dry stoving on red Virginia ribbon from Cornell and Deal as a component tobacco. You can buy this in bulk as a component or a blending component, and I wouldn't say that there's enough difference right now to make it worth my effort. The flavor is different. It's not a big change, and it's not a bad change. It's just different. It's bringing out a little bit more of that nuttiness and that woodiness in it. It didn't get sweeter, I don't think. And it didn't really develop any more depth to the tangy, dark stewed fruit component, the rye berry flavor of the red Virginia. It took a very mild red Virginia already and basically brought it more along in line with a burley. Yeah, I wouldn't say that there's a big enough change. I'm going to have to say for myself personally, I don't prefer it like this. The fresh leaf wasn't too bad. It's not something I would smoke all the time. It wasn't too bad, but this here is just not enough of a change, and it changed it into a more burley-esque, not burlesque, a burley-like flavor, and it's just not something that I will see myself doing. As I said, I may do it by saturating the leaf before I stove it this next time to see if maybe the steam and a little bit more moisture will help. But as it stands right now, I wouldn't say there's enough of a difference. All right, so stick with me for just a second. I'll grab the bright Virginias and we'll see what kind of changes have occurred in those. All right, So now I have my bright Virginia. On the top here, I've got my home stoved. It still has the vacuum seal. You can see the concave lid here. And then I've got my fresh bright Virginia. It doesn't have the seal. That way I can kind of try to distinguish the difference between the bouquet of the tobaccos and see what kind of changes we have. So let's open them up and see what's going on. Woo! That seal is nuts. All right, this is the bright. It's not as dry as the red, which is very unusual to me. The aroma of it, I believe, has mellowed quite a bit. Let me get this fresh leaf here. The color is noticeable. I don't know if you can catch that on the other camera. This is the home stoved. This is the fresh. There is a noticeable color difference on these. The aroma on the fresh is very sweet. It smells just like pancakes and maple syrup to me. Like a brown sugar type sweetness. It smells just like pancakes and maple syrup. And the home stoved is much more like molasses and caramelized sugar. There is a noticeable difference between the bright home stoved and the bright fresh. So let me load this bowl up and we will see if it translates into the flavor profile. All right, so with the bright Virginias, the color was noticeably different. It's a couple of shades darker. The aroma was noticeably different. It gives off a much sweeter, like caramelized sugar smell. The fresh leaf smelled a lot like pancakes and maple syrup. The stoved Virginias, the home stoved Virginias, smelled a lot like molasses and brown sugar, caramelized sugar. So I'm interested to see that if it translates into the flavor. You can see here on the GoPro camera, the tobacco here, it's not as dry as I had expected. It's actually about right, maybe just a tad bit on the dry side, but really, it's not too bad, especially if it were going to be used as a blending component. I don't think it would be all too bad, but the smell is wonderful. So let's light up here and see if it translates into the flavor. All right, so the fresh leaf has the classic qualities that you find in a bright Virginia. It has that grassy hay, a slight citrusy, very, in my opinion, what I call green type flavor profile. This home stoved is not much different. It made the citrus notes a little bit more vivid. It rounded the grass and hay out just a little bit. and you can catch a very, very delicate change in the sweetness. You are catching just a tiny bit of a caramelized sugar. I might even catch just a small hint of cocoa. Almost like it's like a brown sugar, but when you're baking with brown sugar, after the brown sugar heats up, it has I hate to use the word smoky because that's not the proper word, but it has that deeper, darker flavor to the brown sugar after it's been heated. That's what I'm getting out of this. Again, it's not bad. It's not a negative. It's just different. It's just slight. It's like a slight variation to the same leaf. As much as I hate to admit it, I would say that neither one of these, the bright leaf, the bright Virginia, and the red Virginia, neither one of them have changed significantly enough that I would consider it worth my effort to go through all of that to do this. So the quest continues. Just to wrap it up, I tasted both of these, the fresh and the home stoved of the bright and the red Virginias. Both of them had changes. They were subtle. There wasn't very much of a difference. It would take somebody to be really looking for it to find those differences. The aroma was noticeable in the bright, but that was about it. I do not think that it is worth the time and effort put into actually going through the stoving process. So ultimately, my final decision is going to be that this was a fun experiment, but it's not worth your time to do so. Now, I will go into further episodes, like I said, if there's enough interest in it, I will try to saturate the leaf and do it again, and then see if that maybe makes a difference. And then I will also do some tin stoving and see if maybe that will improve upon some tin blends out there. So let me know in the comments if you would like me to do that. I have several ways that I could do that. I could do this with a saturated leaf, try it, and then if it turns out to be good, I could tell you about it, or I could videotape the whole process and do it that way. I do think I would like to, if there's enough interest, I would like to tape the process with the tin method, because I think that would be a much more worthy endeavor. However, as this goes, I'm going to say it was a fun experiment, but it's not worth your time. Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode of Full Dottle. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to give me a thumbs up. And until the next time we see each other, I bid you farewell and happy piping. Goodbye, everyone. Have you enlisted in the Full Dottle platoon yet? It's easy. Just click the subscribe button. Also, don't forget to hit the bell icon to be notified as soon as I upload the next episode.